The Man of the Year. Well, who thought such a recognition would get so many mixed reactions from all corners of the nation? This day's Man of the Year commemoration of President Bola Tinubu, referring to him as tough and resilient since he came into office, has got a lot of people talking. From merely providing leadership to introducing very unpopular but promising reforms, Tinubu has proven to be that daring and gritty leader who is driven more by convictions of his choices than pandering to sheer sentiments or the crowd. Although the removal of subsidy from petroleum had been settled by the previous administration of Muhammadu Buhari and as a matter of legislation by the 9th National Assembly, owning and managing the consequences of that choice had been Tinubu's hardest job since he took over as president. Joining us on the show this morning to further the conversation on President Tinubu's recognition as the Man of the Year by this day, the tax reform and what options are available for the North, if the North will still back President Tinubu in 2027, is Professor Usman Bagaje, an Islamic scholar, political activist, and civil society leader. Now, he served as special advisor on political affairs to the Nigerian Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar in the presidency for 1999 to 2003. In 2003, he was elected to represent the Kaita Jibaya Federal Constituency at the Federal House of Representatives, where he chaired the House Committee on Foreign Affairs until 2007. Good morning, sir. Happy New Year and a warm welcome to the program.
Good morning and Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to our distinguished audience.
Well, Dr. Bagaje, yes, Happy New Year to you, and thank you for joining us. President Tinubu, let's start with him.
Thank you, Ruben.
Good morning. President Tinubu has been declared Man of the Year. I recall that in an interview a few months ago, I think in October, you described him as a man of ideas, but that he is surrounded by very incompetent people, a team that you don't consider, good enough. Well, maybe you have changed your mind, because now this day newspaper says he is Man of the Year for everything: his courage, his determination, his reforms, and how he has intentionally pursued those reforms. He cannot do that alone without his team, by the way. And some of those reforms, he says, he will not turn back. He will not turn away from them, whether it's local government reform or even the reform of taxation in the country. Do you have a different opinion in terms of how he has been very deliberate and he has been consistent? And he himself says he has done excellently well by his own assessment.
Well, if this is a session to assess the presidency of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I think we would need more time to do that. But I mean, this day has every right to declare whoever it wants as Man of the Year. And I don't quite know what criteria and what methods, they followed to arrive at that conclusion. But for all I know, and for all many Nigerians who remember President Tinubu, is the suffering that has been associated with his presidency since he arrived. Yes, I used to know him to be a man of ideas with books around, and we used to engage because, if you remember, I was the National Secretary of AC, which later became ACN, while I was still the National Secretary. So I had occasion to interact very closely and fairly consistently for a long period of time. But I find all that has evaporated. I don't see the ideas. I don't see the dynamism. I don't see that progressiveness. I see somebody who is almost turning into a monarch. In the last media chat, if I got it right, he did talk about the tax bill being sacrosanct. How can it be sacrosanct? This is a bill in front of the National Assembly. Even at that, not properly presented to the National Assembly, because when the Senate presented it, it was not on the order paper. And you can't discuss by parliamentary rules and procedures, any matter which is not already in the order paper. So this idea to smuggle things and this idea of coming through the back door creates a lot of suspicion. And you see, I can go on, but let me make 3 points, if you please. And this is not just about the present Tinubu. It covers almost all our political, if you like, leaders, or if you like, the leadership that this democracy has produced in the last 25 years is characterized by three things. And whatever man of the year you become, and whatever thing you want to do, unless you capture these things or you address these issues, is very difficult for anybody, no matter how well intentioned to. One, the fact that we don't have an appreciation of the future. When government spokesmen speak and when ministers address us on issues around their own mandate, their ministries, they don't seem to have the figures. They don't seem to have the idea of the previous efforts, and there is no vision. We can't see. Let me just use one or two things to illustrate that, if you please. One, 2023, the grains deficit, just grains, that's food that Nigerians eat. The deficit, that's the difference between consumption and actual production, was about 30 million metric tons. Since then, we have had floods in Maiduguri, floods in Jigawa, floods in Taraba, floods in Zamfara, floods in so many other places. Insecurity has escalated. So that must have affected us. So what is our grain deficit, this year? And what are the measures to address this grain deficit? If you can't have food, you can't have peace. And you cannot talk about reforms, you cannot talk about taxation. So I don't see a conversation that demonstrates a proper understanding of the issues in agriculture.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Our guest is still Dr. Usman Bagaje, Islamic scholar, political activist, and civil society leader. Dr. Bagaje, thank you for staying with us. I hope you can hear us clearly now. Hello?
Loud and clear, Ruben.
Okay. You said you were making 3 points.
Loud and clear. I can hear you.
Yeah, you said you were going to make 3 points.
Yeah.
You were on the first one. If you may just continue.
Yeah. Okay. The first point is the fact that government, and this is not just the APC administration, even the PDP and other political parties that have ruled in different, in states, they don't have an appreciation of the future. When they speak about the problems of this country and they want to fix it, I don't see a proper understanding of the problems. And that's a starting point. And like I use agriculture to demonstrate. I was about to use education to say that I made a statement. We did a rough survey, and we found that nearly 60%, at least in the north, of tertiary institutions, and this across universities, polytechnics, colleges of education, colleges of legal studies, 60% are not able to go back to school this year because it's either they cannot pay for the registration fees, or they have paid for the registration fees but they cannot pay for the transport, or they have paid for both registration and transport but they cannot find food to eat. They cannot find the money to eat food. Now, I drew attention, and I was quite happy that the Federal Minister for Education was there, and he picked interest in that, and we did. He invited me and we had a very good discussion. But the point here is the government does not seem to be aware of these facts. And even in the student loan scheme that they have now started, it's not really working. And there is no monitoring and evaluation. So all these are matters that will affect whatever policy, whatever program of government. And these are things that are not being addressed. This is one point. The second point is that governance in the 21st century is a corporate scientific business. You see, corporate governance is about the people, is about purpose, is about process, is about performance. These are the 4 P's of corporate governance. I don't see the governance in this country really taking that shape and process. So a lot of the policies, like the tax policy, there was no process. A team was set up, They may mean well, fair enough, but there were no sufficient consultation. For example, the National Economic Council apparently has not been consulted. They rejected it. The governors have not been consulted. They rejected it, and taxation is is on the concurrent list. And so many other people. And here the president is saying this is sacrosanct. Sacrosanct how? I mean, this is a bill in front of the National Assembly. It has to go through the normal processes. And the president is beginning to behave like a monarch in a way, because if you go back to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, you find that the Constitution, in arranging, in sequencing, government, the National Assembly always comes first. The executive comes second. And if you look at the chapter 2, which is the fundamental objectives of directive state policy, you will see the focus on these things. And therefore, how can a president speak about a bill that he has presented to the National Assembly as sacrosanct? How? I mean, so this issue of governance has a huge, problems that we need to address if we want anything to work. The third point is basically to say that the political culture that is reigning is in contradiction with the principles of good governance. Good governance, which delivers, is characterized by accountability, by transparency, by rule of law, and which is following the processes as established by the Constitution or by the whatever regulatory authorities. But you find that in the political culture, the demand on the politician or holders of political office does not even allow them to do their work. There is a huge demand out there for money, and we have seen what has happened in this last festive season. Ministers were found in Abuja spending hundreds of millions, on ceremonies, showering money, while the 90% or more of citizens cannot feed. The last statistic I read, 33 million are on the verge of starvation. Okay. Meaning that they will starve in this country. Now, therefore, Ruben, are the issues that I think we need to be looking at, not the men of the year business. I find that really ridiculous.
I'd like to further unpack some of those points that you have made. It is the time of the year, so let's just call it. It's a timed conversation, right? But you've spoken quite deeply on the tax reform bill. Now, you've also spoken to inequality and the disparity that we see in the society, especially between the political class and the citizenry. Now, advocates of the tax reform bill are saying, well, this bill is revolutionary in addressing some of these inequalities and some of these injustices that are exhibited through how tax is currently shared, especially VAT is currently shared and paid forward. Whereas, for example, this morning we woke up to news that the governor of Kano State is saying that no, this bill is ill-timed, it's lopsided, and it goes against the values of unity here in Nigeria. Now, you've already commented on the process, that you don't agree with the process by which these bills were introduced. But I'm curious as to which particular clauses you have dissent within those bills, and what your preferred solution would be. Should we amend those clauses, or should we just totally, trash the tax reform bills completely, scrap them, and look for something else?
Now, the team that went along to craft this nearly 300-page tax reform bill, in the first place, I have had occasion to engage with, I think, Mr. Taiwo, or at least I shared a platform with him on this discussion, it doesn't appear that this team really understand the society for which that policy is made. These look very much like some comfortable professionals living in Lagos and Abuja. They have no idea of the consequences of what they are really proposing. I have admittedly there are attempts in the bill to soften or to make things easy for the struggling citizens trying to eke a living in terms of taxation. But on the other hand, there are a number of other major things that they have done to create, one, a kind of disparity within the states to create, and even the bill itself has not defined the most controversial issue of what is attribution, what is derivation. I mean, in the bill itself, there is no definition for this. And when you use words like this in a bill, one of the major things, major requirement is that these things should be clearly defined. And part of the controversy is that if you have not defined it, then everybody will define it in his own way. And then it's one definition against the other. We don't know exactly which one is going to hold. My own thinking is that the proper thing is for this tax reform bill to completely be put in the dustbin, and then a process started. I do appreciate tax reform. I do think we should go, we should broaden the net. There are many people that are supposed to pay taxes that are not paying. There are a lot of things that we need to do, and we can use that to re-engineer the economy. But there are certain things that have to go along with the economy. For example, I would say that Anthony Killer, Professor Anthony Killer that was talking just before I joined you, I got snippets of what he said. And he did talk about, security. He did talk about, I think, a number of things. But for me, there are three things you need to address before you even start looking at this tax. Security is very important, because without security, production is going to be very low. And the space for production is shrinking as insecurity increases. And the insecurity we are going to be looking at is not just the Boko Haram or the rural banditry. There is an emerging urban banditry because of lack of jobs that is taking place, in the cities. When I spoke about the likely emergence of urban banditry because young people who are in school cannot go back, to the tertiary institutions, I did make reference to Brazil some 25 years ago. I made reference to Sao Paulo, a city that became almost the capital, the helicopter capital of the world, because elite could not drive their cars on the street. They will only use helipad, take helicopter to office, helicopter to airport, helicopter to wherever they are going. We are getting there. And that's the kind of appreciation of the future that I made reference to, which appears to me to be completely absent within governance. Because the team around him, I really don't know what they are thinking about. They seem to be out of touch with the reality. So coming back to the tax bill, I feel this bill has no relevance to the current economic crisis that this country is going through. And I would rather we start a whole process that takes cognizance of the kind of economy we are running, the challenges our economy is facing, and therefore craft something that can gradually pick the economy up and will make or facilitate production in a way that will make this economy to begin to recover. We are today nearly 250 million in population. By 2030, which is barely 5 years from now, we are expected by United Nations projection to be 300 million. If we have 30 million grains deficit in 2023, and we are not improving in our production, if we are going to get a number, get into 300, how do we feed this population? How do we provide jobs for them? How do we provide school? How do we provide health care? These are the things that politicians, should be discussing. And I don't find them. They are busy partying around, throwing money around, exhibiting excessive consumption, and they don't seem to understand the society they are supposed to be leading.
Doctor, well, as we begin to wrap up very quickly, you said President Tinubu is turning himself into a monarch. You said that twice. Well, but I mean, it's not of his own making. Is it not the Constitution that makes it possible for every Nigerian president to function like a monarch, in addition to the political culture we seem to have established over the years under the 1999 Constitution? I don't think, one can blame President Tinubu for that. It's not of his own making. But as for the VAT bills, the tax bills, the Senate, the National Assembly, says it's going to conduct public hearings, maybe in January or in February. Are you optimistic that some of the concerns that you have raised and other elders from the North have raised, that the public hearing will address those concerns, and then the gray areas can be sorted out, and we can still have tax reforms in this country?
Ruben, thank you very much for that. And let me start with the Constitution. Yes, with all its faults, the 1999 Constitution is still has certain elements that can check the excesses of an executive. Like I said, if you go to chapter 2, the sequence, chapter 1, chapter 2, the sequence, of institutions of government starts with the National Assembly. The powers of the National Assembly is strong enough to check the president. It's just that we don't have a National Assembly. We have a group of people who are just out there to make money. They have no idea what their job is, and they just go to these poor constituencies and spread rice and palm oil and this, and then nobody talks about that. If we continue that way, someday we'll just wake up to a riot. So yes, we need to address those weaknesses in our Constitution, but even as it is at the moment, we're not operating it properly. Coming back to the tax bill and the likely public hearings that are going to be done, I honestly think that fair enough is the process that we have to go through, and we should do it, but it would be much better for President Tinubu to withdraw this bill and to restart a process of consultation. And he's more likely to achieve the kind of reforms that he wants through that process than simply railroading this particular bill through. Yes, there will be a very robust, I hope, public hearing, and many people have prepared a report. I've been part of about 3 committees where reports on the details, clause by clause, have been picked, and so many things have been said. So it's going to be quite robust, and many people are ready to do that. But why do we have to fight over things that should ideally be for the benefit of the country? Why do we have to create a battlefield in the public hearing in the National Assembly? There are better ways to do these things. And this is why I said, the governance in the 21st century is a corporate scientific business. There are rules and regulations. There are best practices. And it's focusing on people, on purpose, on process, and performance. If we go by those things, we'll find things a lot easier. This is what Singapore is using, and this is where it is where it is. This is what even China is using, in its own way. This is all the countries that have been making progress in the last 25 years have been using some of these, best practices. Here, they have all collapsed. People are just using I don't know really what kind of thing. They just wake up, they just do things. I feel this country has gotten to a point where until and unless we all, and it's not a question of APC, PDP, or any other party, it's not a question of President Bola Tinubu or Ruben Abati or Usman Bagaje or any. Look, we as a people, we should tell ourselves the truth that this country is about to collapse, and we should all come together as citizens and see what is it that we can do, to salvage our country. This country has a great promise. It's a country of of the largest population in Africa. In 2025, it's expected to be the third largest country after India and China. It has great potentials. It has a role to play in Africa and in the world in the coming few decades. Why should we allow it to be stunted? Why should we be allowed to be where it is at the moment? We have the capacity to do so. We have the ability, we have the intention. So why can't the President Tinubu or any president that comes facilitate the process of getting citizens to contribute in a very amicable manner to be able to raise this country? The credit will go to him if he succeeds in doing that.
Well, on that note, we'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Usman Bagaje. You're absolutely right. Nigeria is a great country with great potential and with the capacity to play a great role in the world at large. Thank you very much for joining.